Welcome to 10 Minutes with the Mayor. I'm Michael Severe, sitting in for the City Hall reporter. Mayor Jean Stothert joining us. We had the incident at Wendy's with the shooting. What do you want people to know about what happened with that and you guys' investigation?
Well, first of all, it was a very tragic situation. There was lives lost, and whenever that happens, it is very tragic. I will say that I have viewed the video with the chief, and although it is an ongoing investigation and there's a lot of details that are still coming out, so limited on what we can say about it, I will just quote the chief when he gave his press conference the other day. He said he felt like the officers had no other choice. You know, they entered a scene that a burglary was or a robbery was in progress. They asked the plainclothes police officer that viewed it. He asked for backup. Backup was there within 15 seconds. The officers were very tactical the way that they approached it. But unfortunately, the cops, cameraman, and the sound man were with them that night. They entered the restaurant. It was very, very clear, and according to the chief, that the suspect raised his handgun, pointed it at the officers, and the first two audible sounds on the video were of the suspect's gun being discharged. The witnesses there, the police officers' stories are very consistent. Everyone thought it was a real gun, and he was firing on the officers first. It is very tragic. I met with the father of the victim, the sound man, yesterday, and his brother, the cameraman also. It's a very, very emotional time for the police department. But I think what's really important for the citizens to know with all of this is that our police chief, in less than 24 hours, gave a press conference. He didn't make excuses. He gave a very detailed account of what happened, of what he could talk about already. He named the officers involved. He gave a very vivid description of what he saw on that video. And he truly, and I would agree with him, he felt like the officers had no other recourse but what they did.
One of the big questions, Mayor, is the 30 rounds that were fired. Most people watch TV or movies and think, you know, one shot takes somebody down. But kind of talk about that, and do you see any possible policy changes coming out of this?
You know, I don't see any possible policy changes. You know, I'm not a police officer, nor am I trained, but in this situation, and this, I think a lot more of this will come out after the investigation is completed, but there were 3 officers, you know, they have maybe 14 17 rounds in a magazine, and, you know, they were fired upon, and it is their policy that if they're fired upon in a situation like that, is they try to bring that suspect down. Well, the suspect didn't collapse until he was out in the parking lot. So he was still moving. He was trying to exit the building. And when he collapsed in the parking lot, he was still moving at that time. So they were using the force that they felt necessary to bring this suspect down, and that's what they did. Now, of course, it was a very chaotic situation. This all happened in with a matter of seconds, but you know, they were being fired upon first.
Sure. This is not a part of that situation, but over the last couple of years, we've had murders total about in the 40s. It's down this year compared to what is in other years. But at the same time, a lot of the incidents involve African Americans, involve North Omaha. What are you doing as a mayor to work in those areas, try to help in those areas so we can turn around that?
You know, support the police chief and the police department as much as I can. You know, right now with the incident yesterday, we have 18 homicides. That's greatly down from where we were last year. So what we are doing is working, but it's still 18 too many. You know, the police chief really believes in community policing. We both really believe in getting the community involved. There's a lot of community groups in North Omaha that we are working very carefully with. They're that link between the police department and the community. They're getting in there. They're getting involved in what's going on in North Omaha. That's very, very positive. The other thing I agree with the chief is we don't have enough sworn strength with our police department. If you're going to address crime, you must have law enforcement. As of last night, because we just graduated a new class last night, we are up to full sworn strength right now. And this is the first time in years. We're going to up that to up to 825 in 2015 and up to 840 in 16. We feel like we don't have enough officers for the type of city that we have and the amount of crime we have, and we're going to address that. And so I think what we are doing, the community policing efforts, more police officers on the street, working with our community groups, Empowerment Network 360, those are all pieces of the puzzle,
Sure.
but we still have a lot more to do.
Well, I guess the biggest piece of the puzzle is before you get to the crime aspect, it's such a poverty-ridden area. Poverty goes with crime. What about that? What about working towards North Omaha business-wise and that kind of sort of thing?
And, you know, that is all important because, you know, and if it was easy, we would have already done it.
Sure.
But the number one factor that contributes to crime is poverty. The number one factor that contributes to poverty is lack of education.
Right.
All those are important in our crime fighting efforts. So if you want to start with the root of crime, you must start with keeping kids in school, getting them, graduating them from school, high school, making sure they're employable, that they have job skills. That is all very, very important piece. Workforce training, making
Definitely.
sure that people are trained for the work. There are jobs out there in Omaha that they can't find the talent to fill these jobs. You know, that is something with Heartland Workforce Solution, teaching people how to do a resume, how to apply for a job.
How to get to a job,
how to
too,
get to a job.
yeah.
Public transportation, very, very important. There's a lot of pieces that as a city leader and the chief executive of this city that we need to explore and keep working on. But there's a lot of different aspects that we have to look at. Now, like for example with the schools, I don't have any direct jurisdiction over the school districts. They have their own elected school board. But I feel like I need to partner better with those who do. I meet with the area superintendents. I meet with them regularly for them telling me what's going on in their districts and what we need to do to better partner with them to help these kids that are at risk. One of the things, for example, my office is doing to set an example is so many of these kids, they need mentors. And we made the decision within my office, we are all going to mentor, including myself. And we think if we set that example, hopefully the rest of the city employees will too. Those are very, very important steps, but we all have to work together to achieve what we want to achieve.
Another big topic, of course, this week is the budget.
Yes.
Do you know what you're already preparing to veto? Do you know when that'll happen?
Yes. In fact, I have to have my vetoes, if I'm going to veto anything, which I am, I have to have them down to the city council office, to the clerk by next Thursday.
Okay.
I have to provide a veto letter and explain why I'm doing that. I felt like the budget was very, very well balanced. You know, it offered the first property tax decrease in 14 years. It added more police officers. Every department is running very, very efficiently. And so, you know, it is the city council's job to go through and address things that they want to. But when we had the extra revenue come in, you know, we had an extra $800,000 that will go into the general fund in 15 than we anticipated because property valuations were higher than we anticipated. It's always my position that if we get extra revenue, you don't find ways to spend every penny. You either put it in cash reserve, you pay down your debt, or you give it back to the people in the form of property tax reduction. I wanted to put the half of it in cash reserve, and the other half I wanted to go towards fixing roads in North and South Omaha primarily. The city council turned around, they amended that. They took the additional money in, but they amended it and found ways to spend more. In fact, they spent about $800,000 more than I would have done. And so those are some of the things that I'm looking at. Not that I think that all the things that they wanted to amend and put in there were not important, but not important, not necessary at this time.
Are you up for a budget compromise? I know Pete Festerson had brought that up about maybe you guys could come to some sort of compromise?
Well, the budget is a compromise, you know, and
Right.
I'm grateful that they passed it with the property tax reduction. But, you know, that's the process. They have the ability to veto, and they have the ability to approve and amend with a resolution. I have the ability to veto. They have the ability to override my veto.
Sure.
That's just the process. And so I stick with what I think is a good budget, and they have the ability also to amend it. But I think that the whole thing is a compromise, to tell you the truth.
A conversation was about the bike czar, that kind of thing. They put something in similar to that. Will that be something you think you'll veto?
That is something that I'm looking at vetoing because it's unnecessary. You know, I nickel and dime this budget, and I want to make sure every single position is necessary. We will, and I've told the council, we will have a position that it won't be a bike czar. The position will be a balanced transportation coordinator. We already have the position and the money available and budgeted in our planning department. We don't need to pull money out of cash reserving to create a new position.
Oh, one last thing.
Yes.
They also added some more officers, correct?
That was one of the
9 more, 8
resolutions
more?
that 8 more.
8 more.
You know, both the chief and I, in fact, the chief testified in front of them and said, I have a plan. Let my plan work. He is the one that came up with the number. He wanted to go up to 825 and 15 and 840 and 16. It didn't come from me. It came from the chief. And he said, let my plan work. This is what I want to do. And instead, the city council, in my opinion, ignored what he said and said, oh, we want to add 8 more. We don't know where they came up with 8. I mean, why not 7? Why not 9?
Right.
But 8 more. Well, you know, okay, so they want to add 8 more. Those won't start until the middle of 15. You know, our goal is still in 2016 to go up to 840, and we could still keep it at 840. We have to do what we can afford to do. And so it's a balance between budget and payroll.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's something that we will look at. Of course, we need more police officers. We are adding more police officers. The 8 more, can we do miracles with 8 more? That's questionable, but we'll see. We'll go through it this week, and like I said, the things I want to veto, I will explain with a message to the council. I'll have them down there by next Thursday.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll look forward to see what happens with the budget.
You bet.
Thank you very much for joining us. That's our 10 minutes with the mayor. We'll be back in the next couple of weeks.